17. So, you want a knife. A nice sharp knife. You hone that blade to its limits. It even cuts through stone when you want it to. It saves your life. And then you're outraged when it cuts you accidentally. You see, knives don't switch off, and neither do people. Not when you hone them to a fine edge. Sergeant Cal Scarata to General Oleganze on the nature of training. Operational House, Crew's Hut, 01:15 hours, 385 days after Geonosis. The Goranin opened its eyes, panting. Etain couldn't tell one Goranin from another, unless they allowed her to. They could shut out her force senses just as easily as they could reach out to her. She could detect nothing from the creature, no sense of identity, no emotions, and no purpose. And then the air around her came to life with a shuddering sense of past, of long memory, and of betrayal. "Gir," it said in a familiar liquid voice, "can you do nothing right?" I know you," Etain said. "Several of you know me." The creature lifted its head and tried to rise, but sank back down again. "Darman is Atin well?" Fearfek Darman edged forward and knelt down by the head of someone who had carried out vital intelligence work for the squad on Kulora. Eating could see the pain on his face. Nina caught her eye and simply looked resigned, as if he expected everyone to betray them in the end. "Ginot. Yes, I expect we'll all look the same to clones." Damin almost grinned, but appeared to stop himself. "Atin's fine." Oro cut in. "Just explain why you think killing my brothers is going to help Krillora." Janet focused wild orange eyes on Etain and struggled into a sitting position, flanks heaving. Etain could sense her fully now, bitter and determined, calling out to the void with her mind. She was probably reaching telepathically to her consort Varaquil, once General Zay's agent both on Croissant and Kulora. Scarata had his right arm across his body, almost but not completely casual, clearly ready to reach for his verpine and take a shot if Janot moved. "You think I am giving the separatists information?" Odo stepped in and Darman got out of his way. "I'm inclined to think that anyone who bothers to shapeshift into Vinagius might do that, yes." "She disappeared like she often did. I simply adopted her form to move around unnoticed." "I noticed. We'd already executed her. Then I made an error in taking her form." "Too right you did. Now, what's your problem with the Grand Army? Why not target politicians? You could walk in anywhere, even the Senate chamber itself." "You assume too much. Are you one of the renegade clones that Zay so dreads?" "That's me," Orda said. "I am not the one leaking information to the separatists, and I am not targeting anyone." "Are you still working for General Zay?" Etain asked. "No, My people no longer serve the Republic, if we ever served you at all. We had an agreement. You broke it. But we had an agreement, Jedi. You said you would give us back our world and stop the farmers from destroying us. In the middle of a war. We served you in the middle of a war, when my people were dying of starvation, when our prey was being driven away by the colonists. We kept our bargain, and all you did, little Jedi, you and they, was make them better able to fight and hold their land. Eden didn't look at the man. She didn't want to provoke him into defending her, or, more probably, catch a hint that he might agree with Jannat. She thought that all she had done was to ensure the farmers were a guerrilla force able to resist the separatists, but the native Granans didn't see it that way. We'll root out the informants sooner or later, Odo said. You can cooperate or not, but I might as well execute you now if you're not going to be useful. We can't handle any more prisoners. It was always hard to tell if Odo was playing the interrogation game or simply stating his intentions. Judging by Scarata's quick glance at him, it was the latter. He motioned Etain to stand clear and charged up the Verpine. I can identify the informants for you, Jannat said calmly. Odo simply held the muzzle to Jannat's head. Etain looked to Jusik, and then to Dunman and Nina and Val, but they were all simply watching impassively. Kor was engrossed in the holochart, still logging movements. Wenin sat in the chair, a hand to her brow as if shielding her eyes, but nobody was making any attempt to intervene. Etain's gut said it was wrong, but she did nothing. You are bargaining, Odo said. I'll kill you anyway. You're the ones who needs to bargain. This isn't about my life. Game's over. Odo held the Verpine steady. Etain waited. Torn by indecisions, she could stop Odo for a fraction of a second. Remove your forces and the colonists from my world, and I will identify the separatists for you. Odo, unblinking, passionless, lined the muzzle up about level where a normal animal's ear might be. You haven't told me why you were mimicking Jis. That actually interests me more. Odo, I'll deal, Scarata said. Stand down. Odo simply raised the verb and held it back against his shoulder, without hesitation. Etain imagined he would need to be coaxed into withdrawing. She'd seen the potential violence swirling within him constantly. But he obeyed Scarata without murmur. The sergeant prodded Jannat with his boot. You tell me, then, shapeshifter. I observe, Jannat said. I watch to see when you move troops to and from Colora, and how much you send to the farmers by way of aid to keep them loyal. All the things you never tell us, but that show your true intentions. I spy on you. Let me explain something, Scarata said. I'm not the Republic. The work I do for them is actually for my own people. These lads here. So, If you're not helping me keep my people alive, I'll make certain that Chlora gets reduced to molten slag. And that's a promise. I'm not a Jedi, and I'm not a politician, so I can do pretty well what I like. Your whole species is expendable, understood? Jaina managed to get to her feet, or at least raise herself on her front legs. I will identify the people you want, but the Republic must agree to withdraw from Chlora and remove the colonists within a year. Okay, let's get hold of Zay now, Scarata said. If he doesn't agree, we move on, and I'm not letting you melt back into the city. Do you know how many of us there are? Or where we are? I don't care. They might. My people are here on Coruscant itself. You'll never track us down, and we can be far more damaging than bombs. Look, the logistics leaks are a sideshow right now. Save it for Zay. Scarata opened his comlink. If the general was sleeping, then someone could go and wake him. War didn't keep office hours. Supervisor Renan, why don't you make us all some calf? He expected some complaint, but none came. She stood up, still clutching her ribs, and made her way unsteadily to the kitchen area. It's Bethany, Sergeant, she said. Yeah, she's on our side. Result. Okay, I'm Cal. Who likes it sweetened? All of us, Carter said. 2 big spoonfuls. It's going to be a long night. Operational house, crew's hut. 0 to 100 hours. 385 days after Geonosis. Darman sat cross-legged on the floor next to Janot's hands clasped in his lap, as if he was watching her. Janot watched him in return, orange eyes closing occasionally, her legs tucked under her. Etain sometimes had to look closely to see if Darman was just thinking or actually asleep, because the impression he was making in the Force was so ambiguous. When she knelt beside him to check, though, his eyes were closed. For a brief moment, she wondered if Janot could make telepathic contact with him. His eyes opened. He glanced behind Etain, and then brushed his lips against her cheek. No word from Zay yet. Etain shook her head. There was nothing to hide any longer, and she rested her forehead against his, not caring what anyone else thought. It was impossible to hide their relationship in a tight-knit group of soldiers living in one another's pockets. He's got to consult people. Even Zay can't make those decisions on his own. You should have been a healer, you know. You're good at it. Well, let's see if I'm any good at healing rifts. I need to clear something up with Cal. Problem? Nothing to worry about. Etain knelt back on her heels and stood up in one movement. Scarata was talking to Nina and Ordo by the flimsy sheets on the wall, cleaning his beloved Verpine gun with slow care, while they discuss the concentration of separatists in the various locations on the brightly colored 3D grid of the holashot. She caught Scarata's eye and beckoned him to follow her. He inclined his head in mute agreement and laid the dismantled verpine pots on the table beside him, where they sat wrapped in distorted lines of colored light from the holoshot projection. They walked onto the landing platform. The Strela was asleep on its stomach, all 6 legs spread out like an ill-shaped furry insect. "I did something very foolish," Eden said. "Again?" "Otto." Scarlett looked stunned, then balanced on the brink of anger. "Otto." "No, nothing like that. I used a command that I heard you use. It upset him. I called Czech to stop him from killing Ginot outright. He told me why I should never use it." Scarlett blew out a long breath. "And you understand now?" "Yes, I'm sorry. He said he'd shoot me if I ever did it again." "He would. Don't ever doubt it. I believe you. I never taught the Gnolls that Jedi were their betters, you see, and I never taught them to obey the Republic. And no Kaminoans engineered them to be more corruptive than Jango. But they obey me for some reason, and even then I encourage them to question everything. Is he programmed?" Scarlett looked at her with sudden disgust. Then he simply swung his fist at her, without warning. A savage punch. A street brawler's punch. She leapt back and drew her lightsaber in one movement, but his fist went past her head, deliberately. She could see the calculation on his face. She held her breath, waiting for him to lash out again. "So, are you programmed?" he said. The blue blade of energy thrummed as she brought the lightsaber down from a raised position, and then thumbed it off, feeling stupid and ashamed. She was also shocked at Scarlett's reflexes. He could have landed that punch, and he clearly wasn't afraid of her lightsaber skills. She would never take him for granted again. "No, I'm sorry. You should know better than anyone. You've been drilled in weapons handling from the same age that those boys were. Do you think, or are you so well trained that your body just reacts?" He snapped his fingers, "like that." She had reacted all right. Her muscles remembered years of lightsaber practice. Her masters taught her to rely on instinct, on the Force, and not to think. I said I'm sorry. And so you should be. I taught all my boys that command, from the very start. I drilled them over and over and over until they'd stop whatever they were doing instantly. And I did it for them, for times when it was needed to save them from something. I swear, I'll never do it again. Oda will never trust you now. But it only stopped him for a fraction of a second that could get him killed. You just used him, like all the Arietites do. Scarlett was furious. Even in the dim light on the platform, she could see that the skin of his neck was flushed. That telltale sign of strong reaction. In the last few weeks, Etain sometimes felt that he saw her as the personification of the Republic, using his men for their own agenda, and that she was a handy target on which to vent his spleen. He didn't seem to view Jusik the same way, though. Exploitation was a raw nerve in Scarata. Etain desperately wanted him to like her, and make her feel like family, the way he did everyone else. I'll apologize to Ordo. Yeah, it really is him you need to make your peace with. She wondered why she hadn't realized that to start with. Do I really see them as men? Do I regret angering Ordo? Or do I just want to be Scarata's little girl? She turned on her heel and decided to confront it. Ordo was having a tense conversation via his bead comlink. Forefinger pressed to his ear. Drusik fiddled with some piece of circuitry, glancing up at him from time to time. The sight of the conversations that Etain could hear suggests that someone on Zay's staff wasn't moving as fast as Ordo wished. Drusik mouthed Captain Maze at her. She waited. Ordo grunted. I'll stand by. He shook his head and turned to her. What's wrong? Ordo, I owe you an apology. I was wrong to use the check command, and you're right to be angry with me. He just nodded. It still surprised her that a man who was physically identical to Dawman could somehow look so different. I realize you had a bad deal, Ordo. On Commando. Even now, I think. Ordo blinked a couple of times, as if she wasn't making sense. She had no idea where his mind ranged in those split seconds. Other than that, he felt like a flurry of activity in the Force. I didn't have a mother or a father, but a stranger willingly chose me to be his son. You had a mother and a father, and they let strangers take you. No, General, don't pity me. You're the one who's had the worst deal. It was shocking, and it was true. The extraordinary clarity of his assessment hit her so hard that she almost gasped. It told her things she didn't want to know about herself. None of them changed her intentions, but she knew her motives better now, uncomfortable as they were. She wondered if her real parents ever thought of her. She would never know. 18. Withdraw from Kulora? If that's what it takes to keep the Galanans from turning on us, it's a price we were going to pay anyway. We're too thinly stretched to maintain the garrison. And the Senate has no interest on continuing to support a mere 200,000 farmers on a backworld. Let me talk to Janot and reassure her. The damage her people can do is enormous, far beyond the scope of one anti-terror operation, and we need them on our side. General Olenganze to General Iri Kemas and the chair of the Senate Committees on Refugees. The Kragit All-Day Restaurant, lower levels, Coruscant. 0755 hours. 385 days at the Geonosis. Janot of the Golanin had kept her word and provided the information she had promised. And no more. They appeared to have kept his. The sleek black predator had slipped out into the Coruscant night and vanished. But Scarata would always feel that she was standing right next to him in some guise or another. Like the Jedi, her hypernatural abilities, especially telepathy, made him wary and suspicious. But she could only sense the thoughts of her own kind, they said. Like that's some kind of comfort. Scarata finished his eggs, rubbed his hand across his chin, and realized he needed to shave again. But things that had seemed crushingly impossible in the early hours of the morning looked a lot more encouraging on a full stomach in broad daylight. Kalenins on the loose. Jailer Obram's voice was almost a groan. That's all we need. Yeah, that'll be one of the best kept secrets of the war, I reckoned. You believe them? They might be everywhere. You have to, Jailer. And I can't lose any sleep over a few Calorian farmers. They sat side by side, looking out toward the walkway through the Cragget's grimy, transparent steel front. Neither of them were men who wanted to sit with their backs to any door. Obram leaned in a little towards him. So, do you want us to pick up the suspects the Golanin identified? No thanks. Is this where my eyesight and hearing fail again? Right now, you can't even see me, let alone hear me, said Scarata. Okay, organized crime unit isn't happy, but they understand the words armed special forces really well. It was OCU in the plaza then. I gather so. How did they end up there? Your friend Kribu uses well-worn channels of communications in the scum strata of society. OCU isn't stupid, and it isn't deaf. There is no monopoly of information. Scarata's happily full stomach chilled a little. Obram showed no signs of being smug, but he was almost certainly aware that Scarata was planning a sting operation involving explosives. So, they knew who the Seps were and didn't bother to... No, that wasn't the route. What then? They were carrying out surveillance on a known criminal, and that criminal happened to meet up with one of the group that you were watching. Message boy, one chance encounter. Obram picked a chunk of smoked nerf from Scarata's plate and crunched on it thoughtfully. You just be careful. I hate finding friends on the slab in the morgue. Apart from Jusik, Obram was one of the few non-clones Scarata felt he might be able to trust completely one day. He was still undecided on Etain. While he didn't doubt her sincerity, she had an emotional impulse streak of the kind that got people killed. Like you. You're a fine one to talk. Your boys okay? Tired, edgy, but giving it all they've got. One of them has sworn to gut vow. Another is having a love affair with a woman he shouldn't even look at. I'm collecting waifs and strays like an animal shelter. And we nearly killed a treasury's agent. But if I told you the really bad stuff, you would think I had problems. Obram laughed raucously. And people think they're good little droids. Discipline apart, they're still lads. The Trilec waitress chopped off their calf and smiled alluringly. "Where's your son today?" "At the office, sweetheart," Scarlett said. "Won't I do instead?" Her leg coiled ever so slightly, but he didn't have a clue what it meant. She glided away, glancing back to smile again. Obram sniggered. "I see. Odo made an impression." They all have this naive streak about them. It's fatally charming, apparently. Youth, muscles, heavy weapons, and a trusting expression. Maybe I should try it. 40 years too late. Yeah. And then Scarletta's communicator chirped. He lifted his wrist as close to his mouth as he could. Even in a restaurant full of police officers, he took few chances. "We like what we see," said a voice with a Jabimi accent. It was interesting how accents were more noticeable over a comlink. Scarletta still looked toward the walkway, scanned his field of view without moving his head. He was sure he hadn't been followed. But this was a bad place to be spotted if he had. "It's not noon yet." "I know, Cal. We are keen." "What's next?" "Can you get to the blank plaza again in half an hour?" "I can't locate your comlink signal, but then I can understand why you're a very cautious man." "Too right, you Chakar. Boudica went to a lot of trouble to make me invisible." Scarletta was 10 minutes by speeder bike from the plaza. "I can just about make it if I hurry. This is just for a conversation. Be there, and don't bring anyone else." The comlink went dead. Obram chewed, silent, but his look said it all. Scarletta reached in his pocket and put some credits on the table to cover the bill. "You're deaf and blind, remember." Obram pushed the credits back at him. "You pick up the tab next time." It was his good luck ritual. Obram seemed to hope that by saying it, he'd ensure there was next time. Scarletta had every intention of making sure there would be. Lower level, Skylane, 348. 820 hours. 385 days after Geonosis. Scarletta kept the speeder at a steady pace and looped back on himself a couple of times. There was no reason to expect anyone to be following him, but he assumed it anyway. The maneuver also padded out the 10-minute journey to a credible half hour. No point being too early. His ankle was agony today. "Boudica, how are you doing?" Drusik's voice came over the comlink. "We've tracked a target moving to the plaza from the house. That fine Sev West. I think that confirms it, Periv. But he won't come alone. So that means he'll probably have minders nearby that we haven't tagged. New ones. Fine. Bow's on his way," Drusik said. "They won't recognize him. And you? I'm already there. Fearfek. He knows you. Wait for orders. Trust me. He won't see me at all. Stand down. Get out of there. Okay. I mean it. And I'm going off the comlink now. unless I hit real problems. He shut the link, exasperated. But it was his own fault. You couldn't delegate that much to a kid, and then expect him to read your mind and work out when he was supposed to wait for specific orders again. And he was a Jedi after all. He could take care of himself. Scarata pushed a bead comlink into his ear and brought the speeder down in the public parking area. And Naka said she was fed up, collecting abandoned speeders from around the city, and wanted to know why they couldn't bring their vessels and vehicles back with them every time. The logistics of operations like this depended on a lot of grim drudgery. He'd have to sweeten her up somehow when all this was over. Out in the plaza by the bench where he had awaited the separatists the day before stood Pariv. He was busy looking like an executive waiting for a colleague. Suit, documented case, polished shoes. Scarata walked up to the man as briskly as he could, with a complaining ankle. "Okay, what's the deal?" Scarata said. He tried to focus on Pariv and not look over his shoulder for possible threats, or, to be precise, while on vow. "I can get you the deets in 24 hours. Let's discuss this somewhere less crowded." Those were often the worst words to hear at times like this. "Where?" "Follow me." Fairfax. He hoped Val was watching him, or Jusik was monitoring the conversations carefully. If Pariv moved too far out of the comlink's limited mic range, he'd have to make stupidly obvious comments to clue them in. Pariv didn't strike him as quite that naive. Even if the surveillance team was some way short of professional. If Val was here, Scarata couldn't see him. But that was the point, and Val was a very skilled operator. Scarata followed Pariv across the plaza and back to the speeder parking area, a few moments that made him glad that he had a limp. It gave Val, he hoped, a little more time to work out what was happening. Pariv stood looking around in a shiny new green speeder, with a closed cabin rose from below, the level of the parking platform, and maneuvered sideways to sit down. "Ah, well," Scarata thought, "I'd have done the same. But Pariv's lungs are coated with marker dust, and Jusik can track this crate all the way." "Off you go," Pariv said. "You're not coming too?" "Oh, no, no, no. Why didn't I dose myself with some of that Dekusla dust? Forgive me if I get nervous about the quality of your associates driving. Don't worry. All they'll do is blindfold you. Keep whatever weapons I'm sure you're carrying. I'll see you at our destination." Scarata had no choice but to get in. Two human males, both about 30, one shaven-headed, one with thin blonde hair scraped back in a tall, neither of them the hired help they had tagged yesterday. sat in the front seat, and the bald one leaned over to place a black fabric bag over his head. In total silence, Scarata folded his arms to feel the comfort of his assorted hardware in his sleeve, holster, and belt. "Well, this is fun," he said, hoping for a display of verbal stupidity that might help Jusek locate him. But neither man responded. He didn't expect them to. Concentrate on the movement. Work out the direction. Scarata tried to count the number of times they seemed to swing right or left to get some idea of the route. They were in an automated skylane, so he could count the seconds and try to calculate the distance between turns. But it was a massive task. Ordo, with his faultless memory, would have had the Skylane network memorized and calculated the times and distances at the same time. But Scarata was not a null arc trooper, just a smart and experienced soldier whose natural intelligence had been sharpened by having to cope with 6 hyper-intelligent small boys. He had no idea where he was. The speeder continued toward either a nerve-wracking deal that would take them a step closer to striking at the heart of this separatist network, or a lonely death. Service tunnel beneath Skylane 348, 0855 hours, 385 days after Geonosis. Boudica, "You'll never need to shave again when Cal catches you," I said. "You seriously think I'm not going to follow him?" Jusek raced Ordo's Adatech speeder bike along the service tunnel that ran parallel to the Skylane, serving the southern edge of the plaza. I decided that Ordo had no sense of danger if he was happy to ride the pillion with the Jedi at speeds approaching 500 kilometers per hour. But then the man was nuts anyway. Vi held on to the hand grip behind him for Grimm's death. "Val, can you still hear me?" The comlink was breaking up, but audible. "I'm a few vehicles behind Periv. He's transmitting like a fleet beacon." "Where's he heading?" "Looks like quadrant N09. "What's there besides offices and residential?" "That's about it. Stand by." Jusek made an irritated grunt that he seemed to have picked up from Sev and accelerated. At times like this, I had passed beyond the first flush of adrenaline and into a cold and rational world where everything made sense to his body, if not to his brain. He found an instinctive sense of effortless balance as Jusek wove through the ducts, clearing some of the transverse durasteel joist by a breath. Speed no longer felt like conscious fun, as it had in training. But he was beyond fear for himself at that moment. All he could think of was Sergeant Cal. "He can take care of himself," Jusek said. "He's packing more weapons than the Galactic Marines." "Are you telepathic?" The thought disturbed Phi, because his mind was the only private retreat he had. "I was just... If you're not as worried for him as I am, then I've read you all wrong, my friend. Vodka. Yes, too fast. Look. Even if you didn't have your force powers, you'd still be a terrific soldier and a good man. Vi couldn't see the Jedi's expression. For once, Jusek didn't scare the living daylights out of Vi, and looked back over his shoulder with a silly grin when they were hurtling toward a wall, only to blink sharply at the last moment. Jusek dropped his head for a second, and then raised it again. His slipstreamed hair slapped Vi in the face. I'll try to live up to that. Yeah, but you still need to get your Shabla haircut. Jusek didn't laugh. Vi wasn't sure if he was moved or offended, and it seemed impossible to offend Jusek. Hang on. Whatever element of the Force was guiding the Jedi, it was completely instinctive. He could find Scarata. The speeder swung hard left and Vi feared for the Verpine rifle under his jacket. His folded stock wedged in his armpit. He was used to wearing the scruffy assortment of dull civilian clothing that Inaka had sent over with Val. He wondered how he'd cope with his all-encompassing Catan armor after being out of it for 2 weeks. Jusek's head jerked around as if someone had summoned him. He's heading for Business Zone 6. Been there. Reached that place last night. Stuck a remote holocam opposite the house, in fact. Maybe the Force is giving us a break. That's got to be their hub. Let's try that. Jusek banked right to shoot up a vertical channel. Vi decided 0G had its appeal. At least we'll be able to see Cal if that's where they're heading. I bet that's reassuring. It would be. But if they're using the speeder that was parked in their roof space last night, I clamped a remote thermal detonator in its air tank. Just remote? Not timed? Yeah. That's okay then. If when they got Scarta back in one piece, Vi would tell him he had a sense of humor. There's somebody following him, Jusek said. Yeah, you, me, Val. No, not us. Escort for the speeder. No, nothing like that at all. Someone else. I don't get any sense of malice. But it's not the strike team. What's that feel like? Like someone standing behind me. He took one hand off the steering and tapped the back of his head, behind his ear. The speeder swerved, right there. Both hands, Boudica. Sorry. Whoever it is, they're focused on Cal. Should we be worried? No. Jusek twisted the handlebars, and the speeder accelerated as if it had been fired from a Verpine. Vi bit his lip and couldn't stop his knees from pressing harder into the speeder's bike's fuselage. If he dropped the precious sniper rifle, Scarata would be heartbroken. That's alright then, Vi said. I won't worry at all. Residential area, Business Zone 6. 930 hours. 385 days after Geonosis. The airspeeder settled hot alloy, clicking as its drive cooled. And someone pulled the black hood off Scarata's head. "This way," said the shaven-headed man. "Mind the steps." Scarata walked down from a rooftop parking area through doors to a tastefully decorated room with a large greenless pale wood table and thick deep grey carpet. They weren't short of credits then. Some terrorism was the war of the dispossessed, and some was the handiwork of the rich, who felt second-hand outrage. Either way, it was an expensive sport. He was a mercenary. He knew the price of everything. He sat down in the chair offered, elbows braced on the table, and tried to take in as much useful detail of his surroundings as he could. 2 visible escape routes, back out those doors, or down the turbolift. After 10 minutes, a middle-aged human male entered with a woman of similar age. There was nothing remarkable about either of them. They simply nodded to Scarata and sat down facing him. 4 more men followed, one of them about Jusic's age, and Scarata found himself surrounded at the table by 6 people. Then Pariv walked in. "You'll excuse us for not introducing ourselves, Cal," he said. "I know you and you know me, and that's probably all you need to know." Apart from the bank details, yes. Pariv stood by the chair opposite Scarata and glanced pointedly at the man sitting in it, who then moved to another chair. "You're definitely the boss, then." And the others around the table, who were obviously assessing him as a supplier, didn't look like junior minions. This was either the terror cabinet or a rare gathering of cell leaders. It had to be. Pariv handed the man next to him the small sample pack that Scarata had supplied the day before, and he examined it carefully before passing it around the table. "Yes, they'll be the ones distributing this. I should blow this place now, but that's not sensible, just satisfying. We'd like 100 kilos of your goods and 4,000 detonators." Scarata did a quick calculations. About 25 grams of 500 grade thermal per device. Then, a Bravo 8 depot incident took the equivalent of 2 of those. Enough bomb-making kit for that level of carnage every day for 5 years, or a lower body count and mutilation for more than 10. A very economical war. How much? 2 million credits. Scarata didn't even pause to think. 5, 2, 5, 3. 5, or I need to go and talk to my other customers. You don't have any others who want this kind of explosives. If you think that, then you're new in this galaxy, son. 3 million credits. Take it or leave it. Scarata got up and really did intend to walk. He had to look as if he meant it. He skirted the table as far as Pariv, and then the man turned and put his hand on Scarata's right arm. Scarata jerked it back, and he wasn't acting the jumping mercenary. It was his knife arm. Pariv noticed. Eyebrows raised for a fraction of a second. 4 million, Pariv said. Scrata paused and chewed the inside of his cheek. 4. Credits to be deposited and confirmed as being in my account before I release the goods, and I want the deal done in the next 48 hours. That requires trust. If I don't have any other customers, then why would I want 100 kilos of explosives hanging around my premises until Mustafa freezes over? Pariv paused and then almost smiled. Agreed. Scrata reached in his pocket and handed him a data chip, striped of all information except a numbered account that would exist only from noon to 48 hours. He had a constant stream of accounts like that. All the nulls could slice like top pros. But Jang was an artist among data deceivers. My clever lad. Time and place then. All in one delivery. Okay. But it stays wrapped in quarter-kilo packs, bagged in tens. Because I'm not going to unwrap every Dikutla bar and get covered in forensic evidence. He paused, trying to look as if he was thinking of another reason. And that's 2.5 kilos a bag, which is going to be easier for you to move. What makes you think we're going to move it? Smart, eh? If you're keeping that all in one place, you're insane. I'm used to handling this stuff, and even I don't like it around me. You do know what 500 grade does, don't you? Of course I do, Pariv said. It's my business. Let's say midnight tomorrow. Here. If I knew where here was, I might agree. We'll let you walk out and then you'll see. I can land speeders on your roof, can I? Up to metro cab size. I'll probably bring 2 small speeders. I'll call you half an hour before. I haven't given you my number. Better do that then, or you won't get your goods. I don't want any further contact until then. And I don't want anyone following me when I leave here, okay? Pariv nodded. Agreed. And it was that simple. It never ceased to amaze Scrata how much simpler it was to buy and sell death than it was to pay taxes. Show me to the front door then. Shavenhead took him down in the polished Durasteel turbolift. It always reminded him of Commando, that brutally clinical finish, and walked him through a ground floor that was just one square room with no rear exit and one door at the front. Easier to defend if you were confident you could escape via the roof. The doors parted. Cal Scrata stepped out onto a secluded walkway and found himself in affluent Coruscanti suburbia. He checked the position of the sun and began walking in the direction of the main skylanes. If he kept walking east, he'd come to the office sector sooner or later. Besides, the holocam that Fi and Sev placed a few hours earlier was watching him right now from the building opposite. There were a lot of pedestrians about. Scrata clicked his back teeth and opened the comlink channel. He didn't like the beat comlink any better than he would like hearing enhancer. Listen up, Adike, he said as quietly as he could. Game on. Game on. Logistics Center, Grand Army of the Republic, Coruscant Command, HQ, 940 hours, 385 days after Geonosis. Do I look as if I've been flattened by a pep laser? Bethany Renan asked. Pep laser. Odo, posing as Core again. Helmet tucked under his left arm. Let her pass through the logistics center's doors ahead of him, as Calbura had told him. It was the polite thing to do. And no, you just look tired. I can't say it's been a typical day's duty for me. I respect your willingness to accept this without wanting to complain to your superiors. If I did, I'd compromise your mission, wouldn't I? Possibly. Then it's just a battered bruise and an interesting evening. No more. She was as tall as he was, and looked him straight in the eye. Her dark eyes made her light blonde hair seem exotic in contrast. She's different. She's special. He made a conscious effort to concentrate. I'll make sure you have acceptable records for your bosses to show that the investigation was completed, Odo said, and that the suspects, let's say that I learned they were of interest to military intelligence, so I withdrew from further involvement. Well, I can guarantee they won't be troubling you any longer. Odo was still waiting for her to ask exactly what Val had done to the real Vinagis, and what Odo was going to do to the employees, leaking information. Junot had identified 2 and 1,000 other questions. He would have wanted to know everything, but Renan just stuck to what she needed to know to close down her part of the surveillance. He didn't understand that reaction at all. What happens to you now? He asked. I go back to my own department in the morning and pick up the next file. Probably corporate tax evasion. She slowed him down with a careful hand on his arm. He let that touch thrill him now. He was still uneasy, but he was less disturbed by the attraction. What about you? Reducing payroll numbers, Fi suggested we call it staff turnover, in the spirit of military euphemisms. It seemed to take her a couple of moments to work out what he meant. She frowned slightly. Won't whoever they're reporting to notice they're missing? Junot says they only call in every 4 or 5 days. That gives us a time window to work within. Aren't you ever afraid? When the shooting starts, frequently. It struck him that she probably found the idea of assassinations uncomfortable, but she didn't say so. But not as afraid as I would be if I were operating without weapons. Your superiors really should arm you. They reached the doors to the operations room. She stopped dead. I know this has nothing to do with me any longer, but will you do something for me, if I can? I want to know when you make it through this. She seemed to lose some composure. And your brothers. And your ferocious little sergeant, of course. I rather like him. Will you call me? I don't need details. Just a word to let me know that it went okay, whatever it is." "I think we can manage that," Oda said. This was where he turned left to go to accounts, to find Helen Maderi, a woman clerk, nearing retirement age. Just an ordinary woman who happened to have distant cousins on Jabim. Then he would pay a visit to transport maintenance and look up a young man who had no family allegiance or ideology in this war, but who liked the credits that the separatists paid him. Their motives made no difference. They would both die very soon. "Be careful, Trooper Corps," Bessany said. Oda touched gloved fingers to his forehead in an informal salute. "You too, ma'am. You too." Business Zone 6, Walkway, 10 at the junction of Skyline 348. 0950 hours, 385 days after Geonosis. Vi braced for a verbal barrage as Drusik brought the speeder to a stop at the end of the walkway and settled it on the edge of the taxi platform. Scarata walked up to them, straight-faced, through the scattering of pedestrians, and stood with his hands thrust in the pockets of his leather jacket. "You're leading Vi astray, Boudica. I'm sorry, but you told me that you should never enter an enemy stronghold without backup, if you could help it. I hate it when people take notice of me, Vi. What's wrong?" Vi was still looking around, trying to cover 3 dimensions that might conceal a threat. Drusik had said that whoever was following Scarata had no malice intentions, but Vi reasoned that not everyone who was going to kill you had a sense of malice. He killed plenty of people without any ill feeling whatsoever. While the Force was fascinating, Vi liked to see things through the scope of his Dis, preferably with the red target acquisition icon pulsing. He put his hand under his jacket to slide the rifle from under his arm. This was when the unusually short barrel and folding stock came into their own. You could still use the weapon at short range. Boudica thinks there's someone following you. I normally notice, but you're deaf. Partially, you cheeky dekut. Scarata resorted to his reflex of straightening his right arm to have his knife ready. "Well, maybe we'd better move on before they catch up." "Nobody with ill intent," Drusik said. He slid his hand to the opening of his jacket. Suddenly edgy, Vi took his cue and swung off the speeder to stand in front of Scarata. "And they are very, very close. Steady, son. Public place. People around. No lightsaber? Okay." "Very close." Drusik looked past Scarata. A young man with short right blonde hair was striding towards them through the sparse crowd, arms held a little away from his sides, a large bag over one shoulder. His knee-length dark blue coat was wide open, but that didn't mean he wasn't carrying an armory under there somewhere. Vi unfolded the VUP stock one-handed under his jacket and prepared to draw it and fire. The man then held both hands up at shoulder level and grinned. Fairfax, Skrata breathed. Udesi, lads, it's okay. The blond man, Fi's height, very athletic, walked straight up to Skrata and crushed him in an enthusiastic hug. Sukui Bria. Father. Fi knew the voice. Sukui Aidika. Tion Vai Garui Kri. Nayoya Kari Gihil. Bia. The man looked almost tearful. His pale blue eyes were brimming. He wiped them with the heel of his hand. If I'm not careful, I'll wash out this iris dye. That here didn't suit you either. I can change that too. I've got lots of different colors. Did you like what I added to the 500 grade thermal? I did wonder. I'm still a better chemist than Ordica, Calbia. I finally saw that the face in front of him as a negative image, and suddenly imagined dark hair and eyes, and realized why the man was familiar. He wasn't one of Skarata's own sons. He was a clone, just like Fi, or to be precise, just like Ordo. It was astonishing how much difference pigmentations alone made to someone's appearance. A simple but effective disguise, for casual use anyway. Skarata beamed at him with evident pride. Lads, this is Arc Trooper Lieutenant N7, he said. My boy Morel. So this was Morel. And even though Fi's Mandoa wasn't perfect, he understood that Skarata had asked him where he'd been, and that the Arc Trooper had said that he'd been hunting fish meal. Fi was fascinated, but he kept his fascinations to himself.